Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and it's good to see everybody so energized after exercising, myself included, I hope. So, as mentioned, I lead the Internet of Things program at Forum Virium Helsinki, and during my presentation I will be telling a little bit first about Forum Virium Helsinki, because we are kind of a special player in the picture, and then after that move more to share the journey that Helsinki has traveled so far regarding getting data used and making sure that there's relevant data for all players, the city itself, as well as third parties to utilize and build their services upon. And I was hoping to shake all of you here, but I think the previous presentations were so well in line with the message, so we should really think about the data users and really ensure the collaboration between the data owners and releasers and the data users. So that in that sense, I'm just continuing the same story, I guess. So I don't know, maybe we could have packaged all the beginning, the presentations, but maybe together. But I think I hope to add some relevant experiences we've had until now, and hope to, well, first of all, maybe awaken some thoughts about how you can collaborate with the data users, and then on the other hand, see Helsinki as an interesting place to start developing your services on and start collaborating on creating the digital single market for data-enabled services. So the clicker. So, and why city perspective? Of course, we all know the rate of urbanization in the world. So I think cities are often the places where people actually live and work and experience the daily life. And a lot of the data that cities are holding on to and producing throughout its activities and actions and engagements with its citizens are very close to the citizens. So in a way, it's a place that a lot of relevant data is being created in as well. But briefly about Forum Virium Helsinki, we are there to co-create urban futures together with the city, the companies, the research institutions and other players interested in shaping the future of all of us. And we have kind of twofold strategic mission. On the other hand, we are helping the city itself to utilize different technologies for its own benefit and the benefit of its citizens. But then on the other hand, like I mentioned, we are helping companies to utilize the city as a platform for their service development. And the vision of Helsinki is to be the most functional city in the world, like was mentioned in the introduction. And that's also our mission, to help Helsinki to become such city in the future. Oops. Wrong direction. So we are fully owned by the city of Helsinki. We are the innovation company. We were launched originally 2005, and a bit later then the city took over all the shares of our company. And we have different focus areas, leading the Internet of Things program, but we are advancing with smart mobility, smart buildings, and so forth. And so far we've had around 90 successful EU funded smart city projects. And we utilize quite the variety of different funding instruments, plus we get some funding directly from the city itself. And we've just recently made a poll for our partners on how they have experienced collaborating with us, and we've been very successful on that matter. Here's some numbers. So we've been engaging more than 2,000 residents in the development of these future city services. We have ongoing projects with more than 170 European universities and institutions. And we've had 750 companies pilot their solutions here in Helsinki with us. And we have 46 experts at your disposal. Of the Internet of Things program, we are a team of 11. We have quite a variety of different projects. I won't go into the details about all of them. But what we do is that we've been working a long time. I've been working myself 7 years already with open data, and I will tell a bit about that story later. But currently we are more and more looking into how can we actually ensure that there's relevant, real-time, high-quality data about urban environments that can power these new applications and services and solutions, whether it's mobility as a service or autonomous vehicles or robot buses, or whether it's about environmental monitoring that was mentioned here already earlier and so forth. And we really help the city to develop the ways data is being collected and created, but also managed, shared and used. And some of the biggest achievements so far, we've launched our IoT Smart City Hack Lab, Vekotin Verstas, kind of gadget workshop, where you can get started with building your own IoT solutions, whether you are working for the city or for a company, or you're just an interested citizen yourself. We've been working on Internet of Things platform and data platforms in general that have this concept management readiness, so not just GDPR compatibility, but actually allowing the data subjects to give consent to third-party services so that their data can be utilized more widely. There's our team. And now I will go back. There's a lot of timelines today, and I will be portraying one of them. So this is kind of the timeline of how City of Helsinki 10 years ago got started with open data, and how we quite soon realized that it's not really about just discovery, and many things that were mentioned here are very important, but then also just the interaction between the data users and the possible data users who don't know yet that they should be utilizing your data. So Helsinki region, around 10 years ago, we were helping the city of Helsinki to launch its open data clearinghouse functions as a project. Now it's fully operated by the cities themselves. It's their business as usual. So it's Helsinki Region InfoShare, the data catalog. I actually, while I was listening, I was quickly searching that how many, if you search with Inspire or WMS or WFS, and I think Inspire brought 5 search results, but then when you go to more specifically to WMS, for example, then it's around 100 data sets were found there. And of course, there are APIs, so there's even more than just those individual data sets. City used to have around 100 data sets total, but they've actually gone a bit down on the amount of data sets because they realized that kind of combining them, making them more into collections was better serving the data users and making the discovery of the relevant data sets and all the new additions when some more data was added for statistics, for example, for some years. That helped the data users to utilize and use this, discover and utilize this data. There's around 214 use cases of this open data already found there, and if you're interested in, please browse and look. And of course, like mentioned here many times, APIs, that's something that the developers were really asking for from very early on, so that's something that City has been putting a lot of focus on and eating its own dog food, so utilizing the APIs in the service development themselves. But quite soon, like I mentioned, it was really clear that, it's a big work to get, a lot of hassle already to get data open, and I mean, in that sense, it's important work, but we really need to start fostering the developer ecosystem better, and we launched Helsinki Loves Developers, developer engagement or developer community, and that consisted of a developer portal that helped. It had API documentation and some open source code for reference implementations, but it also served as a channel or discussion forum for discussing and your ideas and your questions regarding these data sets. It also consisted and still consists of events, physical events, so we actually meet face-to-face with the developers. We've been varying between having a meeting every second week to now having it around 4 times per year, and usually it's around certain thematic, because that way we've been able to reach out to a new kind of members, not just the same old faces every time. So we've had events about energy efficiency, for example, or about cycling, and usually the events are built up so that you have maybe some external experts, you have the city data owner side, and then you have the developers, and you are together also discussing what kind of data is available, how could you use it, and then ideating a little bit on what kind of applications could come out of that. Sometimes it's quite technically just discussing certain specification. Is this something that developers see as a good development, or should we do it in another way? So it's really about engagement. And yeah, this I already mentioned. So all this work that we've done, it's around 200 use cases that we were aware of in Helsinki regarding the data opened up in Helsinki region. And you can check the open data use cases per data set. They are, in that sense, linked data here. So you can either go through an application and check what data does that use, or you can start from the data set and see what kind of solutions are already built upon this data. And of course, check whether it's a visualization or app, or what platform this solution is meant for. And yeah, in Helsinki, of course, I think with many of the companies that you work, or organizations that you work with, the kind of promise of open data has been very similar. So it's been about transparency and efficiency, especially in the beginning. It's about government efficiency. But then in the beginning especially, it seemed like the third one is a bit lagging down. So we get a lot of very inspiring visualizations on how money is being spent in the city, for example, which are very valuable for democratic purposes, and also a way to make governments more efficient about their money use, for example. But then that doesn't really bring so much business possibilities. Of course, you can use that data to discover what kind of purchases city is making, and maybe spot new kind of leads for you as a company. But in long run, it doesn't really endlessly create so much business and innovation. And this is something that we also realized in many of the developer meetups, that we have a lot of skilled developers who are very eager to make some kind of flashy showcase about what you can do with the data, but they usually have day jobs and they're not necessarily interested in investing a lot of time or keeping that service up and running. And often also it was seen that the data, open data, that it could only be used for apps, and we really wanted to change that so that companies who are calculating offers, for example, or I mean, these are all very common use cases for you working with geodata, but the data can be used for consultation, training, so many different cases than just, or when you're deciding where you locate your business, for example, all these kind of use cases that a lot of companies, where if they were not in IT business, they were not really aware of. So we joint effort with the 5 other largest Finnish cities to work on this data business. .fi, we have had a 3-year project to increase in awareness regarding open data, but also make sure that companies who are interested in using the data have the necessary skills, or at least they know that which company they could rely on and buy these services from if they want to use this data. Often companies were asking, well, what can you do with this data? So we collected 100 business cases, 100 business use cases of open data, and put it into a publication together and launched them. I mean, published them also on the website. After this process, we also we offered trainings on different kind of tools that you can use for getting started with open data. We organized kind of app challenges for companies that could offer solutions for cities that also utilize open data and so forth. And this is some of we gathered together the lessons learned from that also into a publication called Working Together Towards Open Data Business. And here's some of the kind of lessons learned from that, I think this still applies. This is a couple of years old actually as a publication, but open data is still new to a lot of companies. They still don't know what kind of resources there are for them to utilize. This development takes time, and it doesn't just take time from the company's side, but also from the city's side. So there was a lot of this question, which standards do they, or how do we get public sector to get started with these standards and so forth. So it takes some time to understand the city's own data needs, but also to understand the needs of the third parties who are interested in utilizing this data. And this kind of reconciling and collaboration takes also time. And one thing that we also learned, a lot of companies are not so data savvy. They don't necessarily, they need kind of help also to realize that how can they utilize this data? What could it mean for them? How could their business benefit from such resources? Or, I mean, it's one thing is about how aware are they about open data, but they're often not even necessarily aware of their own internal data and how they could utilize that and how could they combine these two. So that's some of the kind of, well, a little bit surprises for us, but lessons learned from that. And we also, well, if you want, you can find it and check out the other. Also, we made kind of descriptions of the different means, how did we engage with the companies and the data users, starting from the hackathons to these trainings and workshops, consulting, and having different kind of networks helping the companies to discover it themselves, the other companies who could offer data-related services to them. And from that work, we've, of course, that was a couple of years ago, we've kind of continued because one thing, of course, is that it's one thing, are they aware of the data, but is there any relevant data? Is the data interesting enough? Is it real-time enough for the services that the companies wish to build? So this is kind of a bit of a timeline of what we've been working on towards this artificial intelligence and my data, so kind of this concept management ready urban platform, a system of systems that we've been working on here in Helsinki. So 2012, we were still helping to get started with data, creating ease to using open data. Like I described, we then shifted more to supporting data-driven business use cases. We started having more harmonized and interoperable APIs. I will come back to that a bit later. And we also have this proof of concept funding because we noticed a lot of companies still needed a little bit more support to get their hands dirty with the data. In 2016, we started working more on the scalable, impactful IoT solutions. So not just harmonizing how data is being shared, but also harmonizing the data input in cities so that cities wouldn't have to always buy from one vendor, everything from the sensor to the app. And kind of, well, I think Espresso and all this work you mentioned, there's a lot of ongoing activity, but we had 3 different Horizon 2020 projects working on this with a bit different approaches. And then at the same time, we had a big pre-commercial procurement of an IoT platform together with the city of Antwerp and Copenhagen, where we actually started collaboration with the market offering and the city needs, incorporating those together and having a process where starting with the big amount of companies, we kind of slowly narrowed down to a few who then built actual platform for us and came to test it in Helsinki. And now then in 2018, well, 5G was mentioned in the presentation, so of course in IoT the connectivity side is very important, so we've been starting to have 5G pilots, LoRa pilots, checking which means of connectivity is optimal in which use cases, smart cities. We've started to kind of come closer, of course, to also the environmental sensing of the work, and this is also another point where we are coming closer, I guess, to the work done in Inspire and checking that how do these low-cost crowdsourced, citizen-collected air quality measurements match up with the kind of high-quality modeled data that, for example, Finnish Meteorological Institute is offering, and which data would serve which use case best, and so forth. So that's what we have multiple projects working on now. And then what's coming up from the end of this year and next year is really this focus on AI a lot more. So we will have AI for EU, which already started, where they are working on this shared EU-level AI platform where you can more easily and modularly test your solutions and have some reference algorithms, for example, already ready to get started with and so forth. We have actually, well, the digital twin is not mentioned here, but that's something that we are working hard on as well. So checking how can all this collected data find a meaning in the digital twin, and how can that help us to bring context and new use cases for smart building related data, for air quality data, and so forth. So there's a lot of work ongoing on that. And one question that we keep coming to in the end is, of course, how to make this scale. And that's why I guess you are all here. You are looking for standardizing data so that it can be interoperable, more easily discoverable, more easily usable. But now I bring a bit from the city's point of view what has been happening there. So in 2012, we started in City SDK project harmonizing APIs. So we had the citizen feedback API, so this Open 311, I don't know how many are familiar with it, but an API that allows a citizen to send an issue report on a pothole or a fallen street sign. It takes the location, it lets you give a short description, it can offer you some pre-selected categories, and it allows you to send a photo together with it. And after you've sent it, it actually allows you to track how it's been processed in the city. And this was done in 2012. This is an old slide, but because we really noticed that it's creating an application for Helsinki. It's not really, it's appealing. We are a capital. We are, of course, the largest city in Finland, like mentioned in the capital of Finland, like in the example. But if you look at in the era of internet, of course, people are looking for solutions that scale. And we need to somehow tackle that. And every city having a different kind of feedback, citizen feedback API is not really the way to go, because in the end, if you start really narrowing it down, it's quite a similar process content-wise and technically. Then, of course, we come to questions like culture, because when the southern you go in Europe, they say, are you crazy? You're opening up this kind of citizen feedback data, and our politicians would kill us for that, because they don't want to be transparent in that way, that they don't want people to see that it takes so long time to respond to these things. So there can be still this kind of challenges, but technically it's quite an easy solutions where we agreed that we harmonize APIs. So we took 3 different APIs. One was the citizen feedback, one was tourism related data, so points of interest and events, and 4th one was mobility. And ever since that we've been continuing. So there we had 3 APIs in the 6-city strategy, where we had the Finnish cities collaborating on this. We harmonized a couple of more. So the city decision-making process API, that you can track on what kind of decisions have been made in the city, by whom, and there's also a geo location, of course, so you can then go and fetch decisions that are made in your area. Or you can, if you are a dog owner, you can go fetch decisions that are made regarding dog parks, for example. And then, like I mentioned, we shifted more to the IoT side of things. So there we started working on these 5-word technology-based standards that are now part of the Open and Agile Smart Cities set of interoperability mechanisms. We took Biotope. There we had the open groups, OMI and ODF technologies. And then we have My Smart Life, where we actually be looking at Sensor Things API and this WFS 3.0, while at the same time looking at this consent management. So how do we actually create a mechanism where citizens can manage consent regarding certain data, for example, temperature sensor data in their apartment. So how can you harmonize that? There we don't yet have a standard, but Sitra, this Finnish Innovation Fund, they are working on a standard called IHAN for this. And as you can see, there's a lot of projects. So we often find a problem to tackle. We agree how we want to do it. We find like in the citizen feedback case, we found existing US standard Open 311 and started using it. We opened the specification, we engage developers, cities implement it, and then the project ends, and then we're like, okay, who is managing this standard, de facto standard that we've now implemented? And that's, I guess, why these kind of players like we have here today, like you have actually at least the processes in place, and OGC especially already has those mechanisms in place. And from the cities, well, anyway, that's something that we've been a hard time, like, well, not having hard time, but it's been from project to project, and I mean, these things being further developed, but it's still like you still need that standardization organization that everybody in the beginning is so much fearing of, because you don't want to get with the standardization organization because that's so slow and cities want to move fast, or you have a bit of a dilemma. And I think we have good experiences of this approach as well from the user point of view. In Synchronicity, for example, we managed to run 50 pilots of scaling pre-tested IoT solutions thanks to the harmonized APIs that we had in the cities. So it was in 20 cities. And in Helsinki, for example, we had 4 scale-up IoT solutions being tested here. So there was quite good experience from that from the companies who came and scaled their solutions. They got funding for it also, but it was still quite a challenge to fit to various cities. So the standardization works, but again, it's a project. And that's why we've been very happy to see this Open and Agile Smart Cities Network, OASC. I don't know how many, well, you have heard about it, that is actually trying to now create a platform for cities to discuss standards. And I think, I'm not telling this that they would be competing with the work you do, but it's more like it would be very important that these players discuss together so that we can start finding a role, like that there's a easy to access place for cities, maybe like this OASC is offering, but at the same time you can have the hard players in the standardization actually working and managing and coping with the standards. But that I think we still need at this point at least some player in between, because cities don't maybe feel it's so comfortable to directly approach or be active in the standardization bodies, because then they feel that maybe it's too far from their everyday operations and so forth. So they need some actors who understand better their needs as well. And I think that's why this question, maybe it would be nice if you can also use the screen.io to write some notes, but I think it's this kind of how do you say, kädenojennus, so like invitation for collaboration also on these issues, and a challenge to your community also, that how do you, because often cities want to also hear the data owners, and often Inspire is not one of the things that comes as a request directly from them. They don't, I mean, it, like you said, but I mean, it's something you are now already working on, making it more developer friendly, and that's something that I think it's now is the moment to advertise that work back to the cities, because cities are there, one of those public players who are eager to put into practice the best solutions out there. And again, I don't expect that, I mean, this is something I wish that we see happen in the upcoming years, but there's also more direct opportunities to collaborate, and not directly, I mean, also between organizations that are present here. I will tell a little bit more about the funding that is available, and I hope that that many of you will utilize and apply for it. But before that, if you want to get started in Helsinki testing your solutions, you can also check our tech directory and check the data we have gathered in our experiments on data collection, some of the open source software that we are offering, some of the connectivity opportunities that we provide here for test POCs and proof of concepts, and then also the support services that we have for getting started with IoT hands-on, like the Vekotinverstaste gadget. So please utilize these resources. But what I really would like to see happening is that we have more joint projects and development activities taking place together. So we have some direct funding. You can read more about it on our website. in Forum Virium /en/opencause pilots and experiments, a bit hard URL. But in upcoming in 2020, we will have various AI-related calls, so funding calls for coming and getting started with AI, especially under the AI for EU. We have a big air quality data-related innovation competition in the Urban Innovative Actions HOPE project coming up. We will have an edge computing-related challenge in Urban Sense 5G project. And we will start in AI for cities, which is a project where various cities are doing this pre-commercial procurement process together for AI solutions that help to cut down CO2 emissions on mobility and energy. And I'm sure geodata has quite a big importance here. We will start a market consultation next year, and then after that there will be this kind of funding opportunities for developing your solutions in this pre-commercial procurement process. So a lot of opportunities in that sense for collaboration, and I hope that Open and Agile Smart Cities, if you're in any way interested in the smart city developments, is a player that will be identified and also acknowledged, and that we will foresee collaboration, strong collaboration with cities and your community. Because I think one thing that I've noticed quite soon when I 7 years ago got started more with open data is that you always meet a geodata specialist who said that, but we've thought about this already years ago. So I think, like you said, here's so much knowledge regarding data and okay, maybe spatial is not special, but I think it is in that sense that there's so much expertise on standardization and doing things right regarding data that I hope that we can, as cities can leverage it, and I hope that you will package it so that cities are more aware of it as well. So I think now my question is just that how can we help you utilize Helsinki as a platform for your service development or standard development, and hopefully there's more questions coming up.
There are definitely questions.
So the first question is, could you please quantify the benefits, if any, of working with harmonized open data?
Well, the sales quantify. I don't know if I can quantify. I guess for you all, it's from city's point of view, it's quite clear that using standards when procuring things is at the same time making a way of managing risks, of course, because then it's more likely that you can more easily also swap solutions, just a bit like open source. But I mean, in standards, it even leaves more room for swapping and bringing more or further developing your solutions. But then if you look at the boosting this smart city market in general, I think it's very important to go for standards so that companies can actually have a possibility to scale their solutions in other cities. But it is hard sometimes not to reinvent the wheel, which I think often is the starting point.
Okay, then a second question. How do you see the new OGC standards efforts? Are they enough to get developers on board and help developers and data users to create value for Helsinki? Is something missing, and what?
Well, I'm now actually the wrong person to answer, because we have one person from my team coming to Toulouse also in 4 weeks, but he is very positive about it and that the development is exactly going to the right direction.
Okay, then there's a two-part question. First, would it be possible to integrate multi-source data with different modalities in your platform? And second part, does the Forum Virium have any funds to support students, not only in Finland, to utilize the data and realize the useful applications based on your data?
But maybe for the first question, the Selector City is the pre-commercial IoT or data platform that we project that we had, and it's just coming to its end. There was a massive list of different standards, so we are definitely not or we were not, at least then, in a stage that we could just select one and only request that. So interoperability and matching different kind of data sets was very much a criteria there, and I think the companies did quite a good job solving that or tackling that challenge. And then for the second one, I mentioned the last URL. That's the place where you can check on the funding opportunities that we are offering. But there's, of course, ongoing. I mean, in Europe-wide, it seems like it's every week you see different kind of opportunities and fundings. And well, often they are, of course, maybe more hackathon directed, but I think there is quite well funding for students as well.
Okay, then how useful was the Finnish Inspire data for your organization?
That's so difficult. We've been now mainly in the air quality related case, been a bit tackling, like trying to match that world that I was talking about, and then these data models. And well, there's been a lot of work, a lot of lessons learned. I would maybe say it like that.
Okay, yeah. Then what are how do you see what are the challenges for open linked data? And privacy distractions, for example, how did you deal with it?
Regarding linked data directly, or well, I think linked data, like it was very well mentioned. It's all the time like it sounds like it's thought through. The idea is there, but then developers are not really. We've had various linked data related efforts, but then they seem to always a bit. I mean, it's just the ripeness there is not, the maturity is not there yet, I think. But we are still trying to get. About the privacy, I think privacy is important. The more important thing is control. So we all should have the right to decide what's being done with our data. Of course, privacy is kind of the starting point, so it should be ensured. But after that, it cannot be an excuse to exclude me from the rights of managing the access rights to my data. So privacy can be used also, and GDPR can be used a bit like as a way to just slow down the process, I think. So we have to be careful there as people working with data.
Okay, then one more. How did you get all the public agencies and companies to provide their data to your platform? Well,
that's actually, like I mentioned, Helsinki Region InfoShare is doing that hard work. So they are actually working on getting data opened. So it's more, I mean, we still work on some of the projects on kind of helping them, but mainly they do that hard work. And they have 2 people working there full time. So I think it tells about the work that it takes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.